Chairman, sorry, the Federal Reserve Fed Chairman, the Fed Chairman, Jay Powell, who has taken in the spot of Janet Yellen back a few years ago, has now started to reverse course on his beliefs on monetary policy. For the past few years, he was remaining on a very hawkish trend. It was this idea that as Jay Powell came in a time where the economy had just seen tax cuts, all kinds of things that could continue to stimulate asset markets, it was time to empty out the punch bowl. It was time to continue with raising interest rates, getting back into more kind of fixed monetary policy, and along with that as well, to reduce the Fed balance sheet, to reduce the reliance on the Federal Reserve and other central banks. And Powell saw that it was time we could do that. Well, now he's reversed his trend. Now again, Powell's just the face of it. The Fed as an organization has decided that the indicators point that there is a need to cut interest rates, that there is a need to continue stimulating the economy. But more specifically, focusing on the interest rates here, what is this telling us in this case? Well, we're at one of the longest economic expansions in history. And there's a really interesting combination that's coming into play here, that over the last few decades, interest rates have been making lower and lower tops. In fact, as we start to reverse here, we are continuing that trend of making a lower high here for interest rates. And if we take a look at this chart here, there is a severe problem that's going on right now on the global stage, and it only seems to be growing. And that is that a variety of debt, in this case, mostly, I would say, from my understanding, basically public sector debt from government, in this case, because it's basically issued treasury note, is now negative yielding debt. Okay. Now, as you all might know, I know not everyone's completely into finance. Some might just be into crypto. To give a little bit of an explanation, a treasury note or a bond is usually a yielding asset. It's something that, for example, and I'll explain how it kind of works. It's basically when treasury notes are issued, it's basically the government. Let's say I've got Nick's government right here. I got some expenditures I need to take care of. Hey, viewer, I would like to, for example, give you this fancy piece of paper that is called a Nick Treasury, and I'm expecting that you're going to pay me a fixed price for this at the start, so I have some cash on hand to go spend on things, and I will give you not only interest payments on top of that, because you're holding my fancy treasury note, but along with that, you can go and sell that treasury note on the open market, and you could get your cash back to some degree. It might have gone up in value, might have gone down in value. That's your risk that you're taking in, but you're getting my interest payments over time. Sounds like a fair deal, right? Well, that's how the world of not only IOUs for governments works with treasury notes, but it's how the world of debt and IOUs work for everyone, right? That's how it should work. Every economist knows about this. Every economy has issued some form of debt over the last few centuries. But in this century, the 21st century, we have had a very interesting time where the table has turned. Wherein lie where the Nick government, for example, myself, I come to you and I say, hello there, fellow viewer. Say, I really need some cash because I've got to buy a new Tesla, and I've got to buy a mansion, and I've got to buy more crypto. So, I would like you to give me $100, and I'm going to give you a fancy piece of paper that says, you're going to owe me a little bit of money from time to time. Now, that doesn't make much sense, right? I'm literally asking you to give me money so that you can hold a piece of paper that is, over time, slowly going to be giving me money. How does that exactly work? How did that become a $14 trillion market? Well, it has to do with a very interesting phenomena that we're in right now. See, the one thing that's very concerning here is that most of this, I would say actually kind of the good news in the sense of other global participants, is that most of this is in Japan. Japan has had very extreme economic expansions in the past. We've talked about it. This is a documentary I recommend you all watch. It's called The Princess of the Yen. It'll explain how Japan's in this situation. But Japan is one of the largest representatives of negative yielding bonds. And a lot of it can come from the form, it can not only come through the form of private debt, but mostly coming through the public sector, through government issuing treasury notes. And this has to do with the fact that Japan has embarked on what's known as negative interest rates. So you get a negative yield usually when you're going to have negative interest rates, because this means that the cost to borrow capital, in this case, is actually, in order to borrow capital, you're actually getting basically paid to take risks here. The cost of capital is below zero. Now, when interest rates, for example, are, let's say, 5%, for example, This means that a business who can't take money and make 5% or more should not take out debt. Because if I'm taking out, debt at 5% interest, and I'm going out and trying to build a company and make a profitable business venture, maybe I can make 3 or 4%, I'm still going to lose money because that interest rate is over top of what I can make in my profit margin. And this is why interest rates are lowered during times of recession, to stimulate the economy, to make more businesses that are less profitable able to go out and make a venture in this case. But when you get into a negative yielding environment, this means that companies that lose money can continue to operate. So it's a very fascinating scenario. And the crazy thing about it is that we still have $14 trillion already established in negative yielding bonds. And pretty spread out, as much as it's mostly Japan. We've got some in Germany, France, Italy. Most of this is in Europe. But we're at a time where we're now at a 33% probability of recession, and we know soon after, looking at the Federal Reserve's indicators for recession, New York Fed's indicator here, that usually when we get above here, it's very quick to jump to 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100%, and eventually hit a recession of some sort. And sometimes it sparks off a little bit earlier than expected, as it did here in 2006 and 2007, as a precursor to 2008. So this is very concerning, because if we're at this high of a probability of a recession and interest rates are near zero or actually negative, what does that tell us about the economy? I mean, it's one thing to know that there are a lot of investors losing money by holding these treasuries, and this is going into a lot of people's portfolios. I recommend you watch this video by the Financial Times, and they basically explain why some people would own negative yielding debt in this case. There's a few reasons. There's some speculative reasons for investors who are betting against currencies, or those who are betting on the bond price or the treasury price going up over time and the yield going down, holding it in that case to earn a profit from buying it lower and selling it high. But a lot of these things are getting tossed into people's retirement portfolios through their basically their pension funds. So it's a huge hot mess, and it's getting passed on to pretty much everyone. And Warren Buffett even talked about it. He gave an example throughout his company. He owns Berkshire Hathaway, which is a huge conglomerate he operates. It's made him wealthy. He owns an insurance company. They own an insurance company in Europe that is currently embarking on negative interest rates or negative yielding rates in this case. And basically, they lose money keeping it in the bank in this case. They lose money as a company by parking their capital there. So they'd be better off, as he used as an analogy, by stuffing it under a mattress. The only reason he doesn't do that is because he doesn't feel safe having his cash in some place that's vulnerable like that. Under a bank, it is insured to some degree. So, again, we've got this hot mess here. We've got this fact that we are, at the longest economic expansion in history. Rates are still relatively low in the grand scheme of things in the United States and the broader economy. And if the United States decides to drop interest rates back down to zero to stimulate the economy, or to keep up with the currency activity of other economies, or worse, just like Europe, just like Japan, enters into negative interest rates, it's going to continue to balloon what's already pretty concerning. And I think people are going to realize that there's something very wrong in monetary policy. As Warren Buffett has, the Rothschilds, there's a lot of very wealthy and prominent individuals have talked about. This isn't some conspiracy. This isn't some kind of doomsday, reality that I'm building in my head. This is a serious issue. This is unheard of in regards to economic theory. I can tell you that a lot of people are going to be real interested in something that isn't negative yielding, that isn't, absolutely diluted in the sense of the inflation that can be, the inflation that can be, present in order for no, people are going to want something that's finite, predictable, that is going to be rallying at a time when people realize that this absolute cabal of financial products are not actually valuable. They're just, it's all promissory IOU. The currency, the debt, it's all the same. So, it's very, very interesting, guys. I mean, I really think we are witnessing one of the most interesting times in financial history. And I think it's amazing. You know, we've seen Bitcoin. I don't know where it's at exactly. Respect, you can take a look at Bitcoin market cap. I mean, you know, Bitcoin's below $10,000 right now. I am so interested to see where this thing is going to go, guys. I honestly don't know if it's going to be Bitcoin. I don't even know if cryptocurrencies will be around. But I will say that there's nothing that makes me more confident about the financial future than cryptocurrencies. There is a future of them. I think it's going to be extremely exciting to have a finite coin. And it's going to prove that this whole system can't prolong. I mean, it can go for a little while. I'm actually quite contrarian to a lot of contrarians in the sense that I do believe the Fed still has some weapons, as well as other central banks, to continue pushing this scheme going on for some time. They can continue to buy up equities on the open market to prop up the stock market. They can continue to lower interest rates. We've got a little bit of a ways to go to zero. And we can even possibly experiment with negative interest rates for a little while. But it's not going to last. People are going to get tired of it. They're going to realize just how much of a sham this is. There's not enough speculators who want to buy negative yielding interest rates to beat out against shifts in currency markets as some do buy negative yielding bonds for. This is a broader problem, and I can tell you that eventually the Ponzi scheme ends. The gig ends, stops. And eventually people are going to want something that may not yield them interest, but gives them a stake in a global store of value. And I think gold and silver do well, but I think that has to do with Bitcoin as a currency. So that's it for the video, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at our interview with Pixel. Alrighty, everyone. So in today's video, I'm going to be sitting down with Sebastian, who's one of the managing directors over at the project Pixel, which aims to build scalable, private cryptocurrency. Sebastian, thank you for making the time to come on. Really appreciate you spending some time to talk to me about this. Scalability and privacy are right down my alleyway. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the interview. I'm excited to be here.
I want to get down to the topic that I think is important to kind of address here. There's a lot of desire for currency or this kind of evolution that we're all desirous for crypto space. But I'm curious, for you guys, it seems that there's a focus on these two things, scalability and privacy. So before we even talk about how you guys are going about doing that, there's a lot of different approaches to scalability as well as privacy. How are you guys, why are you guys so certain on those two things that need to be done in cryptocurrency and the application side?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Let me start off with the scalability aspect. And we decided to put really a lot of effort into scalability because if we look at how we can already do payment transactions today, I mean, we can send money by PayPal, for example, to a friend free of charge in a matter of seconds. And so people today, what we think is expect the payment to be settled in a matter of seconds. And that's why we wanted to keep a lot of focus into the topic of scalability. And then, on the other hand, we've got the privacy aspect. And we believe that all of the stakeholders of a cryptocurrency, like for example, a private person, but also companies and governments, actually want a cryptocurrency to be private. Because let's take a simple purchase as an example. If I am going to purchase an ice cream with cryptocurrency, then I don't want to care about possibly anybody else being able to see my transaction on a ledger or to run some machine learning tools on the ledger and find out which other transactions I possibly did. And that does not only apply to private people, that also applies to companies and their competitors, and that also applies to governments and other governments. And so we think a private cryptocurrency